Welcome to District 4, to the point for information and news. I'm your host, A Love. We are going to, week's end, talk about the DIDDY Trial. This is a trial that, you guys brought to me. I actually started it because it was an interesting subject, and I was like, we didn't know a lot about Diddy's personal life back then. And then you said, hey, you started it, you gotta cover the trial. We need to know, what's your take on it. So I started last week. I can only do week's end because I don't have a lot of time to do anything else. I really was going to wait because I was kind of tired, but it's a lot going on. We're 10 days in. 10 days in this trial already, and the first off the rip. But before I get started, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. You guys got my last message when I said make sure you do both channels. And that's starting to happen now, so I do appreciate that. Thank you for following me both on TikTok and on here on YouTube, but they're different. So, you get two different elements and aspects of who I am. But thank you for that. So let's go back. So I want to bring to everyone's attention, as we understand, but so soon forget as we start talking about these trials. This is in New York City. And I say it that way because they're pretty savvy people. We've got two on there, at least we know, from Brooklyn, right? So the translation, when we think about the jurors, isn't going to be the same if it's a jury and we're having a trial in even New Jersey, for example, or even in Wyoming, or even if this was happening in California. It's just different. There's different cultures in different cities or places, and New York has a very rough edge. They're known for it. So when you come in here, a lot of us Los Angeles, we go in there and we say, Cassie, and heartbreaking, and mama's on the stand, and she went through, and we take that very hippie, touchy-feely approach because that's who we are, right? That's what we do. But we have to be realistic. This is not happening in California. This is not happening in Wyoming, where there's, free cops make you fall on the ground because you've never heard of this type of behaviors, or Oklahoma, for example, that doesn't have, I think it's illegal at one point, if not even now, to even have porn. Yeah. So this is, that would be completely different. I would say cast of characters, as if to say the jury box is different. So I try to remind everybody, we're in New York, people. So the attitude towards what we're hearing is going to be very different. So I think we need to remind ourselves of that as we go through this trial. And I'm going to remind you guys of that as I go through and give this sort of analyzation of what this jury might be like, or how they might be perceiving what's happening. Because sometimes the last one, you guys were like, whoa, wow, we thought you'd be all empathetic. And it's not that, I'm not speaking personally. I am speaking in a legal sense, and I'm speaking about that jury box. I'm speaking about the prosecutions and the defenses and the laws that apply to this case. So it's not about me and my personal feelings. Okay, having said that. And we already know that because everybody that watches this channel understands it. Okay, so let's talk about what happened, how this case is going. Now, you saw me go in on the prosecution earlier. And one of the main questions that a lot of people had along those lines, and I'm getting ready to just kind of to rein it in a little bit, is why, number one question I've been asked multiple times, and I think a lot of people asked the question, was why was, I want to make sure I say his name correctly, it's a Sheree Haynes, aka the Punisher. Okay, first of all, everybody's just floored at the fact that he was called the Punisher. We're like, what? Is this going along the same lines of, this type of Diddy life? It's a sort of a good irony that he would, having these incidences with a guy called the Punisher. But that's not the question. The question is, why did the prosecution put him on the stand? As a matter of fact, one of you directly asked me, You said the Punisher seemed like a witness for the defense, but why was he called by the prosecution? And I'm going to answer your question. Because it's closing a hole. It means if they left that open, do you know the defense would have called him? And it would have looked like Cassie was, caught up in another, coercive, situation. They meaning the prosecution, having let the defense call this witness, do not get to control the narrative. So I think this was a good move for the prosecution. Even though it looked crazy to everybody else, it is a good move as you can apply the reasoning to the closing argument. So this is a good example of how you can do that for you, those of you that watch me for the legal purposes. It's a good example of how you can beat the defense to something that's Captain Obvious. They're going to have to call this person as a witness. And it could have been taken that way. So let's say, just to make the point, let's say that we go ahead and say, defense calls, I'm sorry, Sheree Haynes, aka the Punisher. And he comes to the stand, and what is he testifying? He's going to say Cassie called him without Diddy. He's going to say she met him at the door, she called him her husband, and she said that, she meaning Cassie, that it was her husband's birthday and she wanted to give him a surprise. What does that do if you're a defense attorney? It means you can be like, listen, this woman, contrary to how she looks now, did have a wild side. She lived this lifestyle, and she wasn't trapped in it as if it may appear by the prosecution. They want to make it look like that because they need to make my client look like the villain. Right? They have to make it look like she was unwilling. But he didn't make that call, she made it. And there was no proof, according to our witness, the Punisher, that she was under any type of duress. So that's what I'm saying. So you can't control the narrative that way. And by the time that's already put out as a juror, the jury box is like, you know what? Yeah, absolutely. So she was participating. She wasn't innocent. But if you call them yourself, as a prosecution, you call them, you control the narrative. You can say, we called them because, and continue on with your reasoning, applying it to your case. So I say the long way to answer your question is to control the narrative. And it's a smart thing to do because you can always wrap it in at the end, at the closing arguments. Okay? So, in my opinion, am I them? No, I don't know what they did. I don't know, not in their head. But it would make sense and stand to reason that you would call a witness like this to control the narrative. So, okay. Another thing is, a lot of his testimony really did make Cassie look like, if I'm sitting on the jury box and I'm from New York and I'm, hearing this, that like she was not innocent. And remember I said that. I said she's going to come out at the end not looking so innocent. If the defense doesn't do it themselves, they're going to come back with that. Because what they did was open the door for it, as I said in the first video, they meaning the prosecution, for that type of bashing, for lack of a better description, or that type of narrative to be consistent throughout throughout the trial. Now, another thing is the crime. Speaking of crimes, the crime itself. I know everybody you apply empathy and everyone's, we feel all these things, and Puffy's just the most god-awful person in the world, and he, I can't believe he beats women, and but none of that, as I stated earlier, and we continue to see, is not RICO. It is not, federal. It is not what he's in court for. Okay? So to bring that around, when we look at the other witnesses, they bring in someone like Scott Mescudi. Scott Mescudi, aka Kid Cudi, has his own fan base. I was shocked when a lot of people didn't know who he was. I actually like his music, and I followed him as a fan. because I like his songs and I like his music. When he gets something new, I come out and get it. So I was, for being a fan of his, I was like, oh, a lot of people, but people know who he is. He comes in there with his own following, and he tells this story about Cassie, about Cassie and trying to get away from Puffy, is what the prosecution is trying to make this look like, right? Cassie's tried to get away from him, and doing so, she gets involved with someone, another man, aka Kid Cudi, and he, as a result of this, Puffy comes in, here comes Sean Combs, threatening people. He blows up his car, he breaks into his house, he makes sure that Cassie, is not going to get away from him, and so on and so forth. But it also brings to light that Cassie was dating two men at the same time, intimate with both of them at the same time. It also brings to light that Cassie herself gave Diddy, or Puffy, or Sean Combs, her other boyfriend's address when he got mad that she was dating him. Now, some could argue this just is a jealous boyfriend. It depends on how you view the situation. For those people that are not in this sort of life with this sort of control and violence and alternative lifestyle, this looks like, yeah, well, wait a minute, there's some stuff going on there. Definitely, she was trying to get away, because wasn't he abusing her? But if you're in that life, some people say about that life, it could look like you're just being jealous in a simplistic form. Because what you have to do is you have to show this coercion. You have to prove that he actually is linked to this bombing. Unless you're going for RICO. Because RICO has to prove enterprise. And that's what I think the prosecution was trying to do. I think they were trying to show enterprise, because it's not necessarily that Puffy had to do this himself. It's actually better for the prosecution if it shows that he may not have done this himself, but rather ordered people from his staff to do it. So that's really, when you say extortion and you leave it at that, it's a bit more than that. It's also going towards the RICO side of enterprise, because you have to prove enterprise in order to have RICO. It just has to be done that way. So it's an attempt by the prosecution not to just show this relationship, but to link it to RICO, which is thus enterprise. They have to show. That's why they have other witnesses coming on to sort of corroborate that, right? They want to show, one of the witnesses actually did do that. There is, I won't say he did it, but George Kaplan, Puffy's ex-assistant, he was in charge of picking up and putting together, these, or cleaning up after these sort of sessions that took place in this motel. Sessions, we now know, because Cassie said it out of her mouth, really do reference some sort of freak off. So I'm saying that just so I don't have to keep using the word freak off. But for these freak offs, he also, as a witness, testified to the fact that he bought drugs for Puffy Combs. And everybody's like, okay, this is it, trafficking, and you're like, wait, hold on. Not necessarily. Because trafficking means that you actually sell them. So I was confused as to why him buying drugs for Puffy was included as a statement, and where does it apply to this case that appears to still be open. This is not open and shut. This is starting to look like there's a lot of room, as I stated, for the defense to come in there and sort of knock down what we've seen so far. Also, this is, again, New York City. We're in New York. You can't just come in there with all these different people with different lifestyles and just tell them anything. You can't say, he was buying drugs, and people say, yeah, maybe people don't take drugs. Some people. But there's a lot of people that do take drugs, and you have to buy them to take them. Now, buying drugs is not something that is legal, but it is not federal unless you're selling them. Okay? Dissecting his testimony just a little bit more, he meaning the Mr. Kaplan, also talks more about the fact that there's a lot of distress and threats and, fear, aka this boils down to. And this is also an attempt to put it towards enterprising. But it's not a strong attempt. No, it's a strong attempt, but not necessarily executed to the point where you can say definitely this man was fearing for his life when he was doing these things, so that he was doing these things sort of in the sense with the understanding that there was nowhere to go. The attempt by the prosecution is to make it look like Puffy made people feel like there's nowhere I can go, there's nothing I can do. I'm caught up in this sort of aka enterprise. I'm caught up in this sort of this man has people everywhere and things everywhere, and the people that work for him, were, as if you could say they were doing in the case of his probably cellmate, just kidding, R. Kelly trial. But with R. Kelly, there were minors, so there's a little bit of a difference there, but still federal in a lot of federal. The sex trafficking part, because trafficking has to be in there. Now, they're not showing drug trafficking, but they're saying sex trafficking. That is the charge. The charge is sex trafficking. They still have to show, because with the Punisher, somebody said, one of you guys were like, that's it. He said it. Sex trafficking. He came in. They paid him. But he was in New York. He meaning the Punisher. That's not federal, because it means he didn't go to any other state. And this has been brought up. It was brought up really at the time that a lot of people were kind of going down that road of it being not necessarily accepted as trafficking, because it can't be, because he meaning the Punisher was paid. Yes, he was paid for prostitution. Yes, that might show that, but it doesn't show that it was a trafficking situation. So where are those witnesses? Because are they trying to say that the freak-offs are in every state? Then therefore, I don't think that's enough to prove the case, right? It's not enough of closure for them meaning the defense, to not be able to come in there and sort of knock that down. And all you have to do is knock it down enough for one or two of the jurors to say, I'm not buying it, and then you have a hung jury. Which is, I say, a win for the defense. Some people may say no. I say yes. It's a win for the defense if you have a hung jury. And it doesn't take much to get that. You don't have to have all 12 jurors to get it hung. I mean, as a matter of fact, by definition, that means just the opposite. It means some were saying they were guilty and some were saying that they were not, or at least one or two. And that's all you need. Okay. So that's part of the situation as well. And then we go into Don Hughes. I'm reading off my notes, by the way, so you'll see me look down. I do write old school notes most of the time. I don't use a teleprompter. Don Hughes, I said Danity Kane in the last video. You guys all jumped on me. Her name is not Danity Kane. I understand that. I forgot to say the girl from Danity Kane. Okay, sorry. Her name is Don Hughes. But I like that you guys are on me, so keep me accurate. But she was in a group called Danity Kane. Now, a lot of you will remember this from, not to go into too much history, from Making the Band. That's all I'm going to say about that. But she comes on, she testifies for a couple of things that you can highlight in her testimony. She was strong the first day, and this happens a lot, and it is always difficult if you're a prosecutor, or difficult or easy, or a win for the day if you're the defense. The witness will come in there, they come in there strong, they're going in. And then all of a sudden, I symbolically turned the page, because the next day the page was turned, right? The defense, Nicole Westmorley, ripped into this witness. and she ripped into her harshly, and then she left it with a mic drop, what I call a mic drop, which is just an ending where it's just silent. And part of it is that she meaning Dawn Richard, am I saying her last name correctly? Somebody correct me if her last name's being said wrong. This is how I spelled it out, so I hope it is. Testified that she saw Diddy beat Cassie. She hit Cassie with this pan, skillet, if you will. Okay. She also testified that looking at my notes really quick, hit Cassie with a frying pan. She also said one more thing that I wanted to highlight. She said, I'll find it. She made two statements. Anyways, let's focus on this statement because this is the one that really went into her. They really went into her with. She said she testified that she saw Diddy hit Cassie with the skillet, this frying pan. And then the defense goes in there and says, but you also said when you were interviewing with the prosecution that you didn't know if he hit her, right? Did you not say that? And I'm saying it less intense than it actually would have appeared probably in the courtroom. But, this was on October 31st in 2024. So now she's saying she hit him, and the next minute she's saying he didn't really hit her. So the thought here, if you're looking at it from the juror's box, is that, or the jury box, is that you're seeing here that the true story might have been the original because it was closer to the incident, right? Now down the line, all of a sudden, people's memories change and the person actually got hit. So you are an eyewitness, so you have to give testimony of what you saw. That's, by definition, what an eyewitness is. So she's giving eyewitness testimony as she gave on October 31st in 2024, but less close to the incident. So you put in the jury's mind doubt. And she came across doubtful. Because she's trying to say, why, I said it as I remember it, and then all of a sudden you start breaking down and the jury starts looking at you differently. And that's exactly what happened in this case. I love the fact that, I don't love the fact, but the defense ended it by saying, let's talk about that civil. She talks about the civil part of Dawn had a civil case. And she says, why didn't you just go to the police when all this was going on? Because she testified to a lot of things, but I'm only highlighting certain areas because I don't have a lot of time. And she says, you could have went to the police. And Dawn's answer completely, she just broke way down. And she basically goes on a tangent about talking about how she felt she should have been compensated for the work that she'd done. And she compensated for what all she had been through. She goes through this whole thing about being compensated, using the word multiple times. And the defense lets her go off. She's going all in. And she says to her, so compensation, meaning money. And Dawn, without thinking, says, yes. No further question. Bam, mic drop. She's done. The weight to that testimony just became wobbly. If not, in some of the jurors' mind, done. Because some people flat out are like, if you're lying, we're not even going to conclude that. You know what I'm saying? So that's a mic drop testimony on cross. Mic drop on cross for somebody's testimony. When you have something like that, you make them answer, but they can only answer a yes or no. And you get the answer you need, and then that's it. You don't have anything else to say. All right? So I thought, good win. Good win for the defense on cross. And they really got her on that one. Another one was the one about Cassie's mother testifying. And a lot of people were very heartfelt and couldn't believe that this woman was being what they believed was extorted, and Puffy asked for this 20,000, and all of these things. And some people, oh, extortion. I see the element right. I see it right there. That's exactly what it is. He asked for money, and not so much. We're talking legally now. And we have to go into some of the details of what happened here. We have to go into the fact that Cassie worked for Diddy as an artist, which means they're given money that is paid back to them from the record company. Paid back to the record company. It's like a loan. And through the money you earn from having worked with them, you give the record company their money back. Number two, Puffy gave the money back a couple days later. So you're like, okay, but still, but when you work in the legal field or you do law all the time, you forget what regular people are thinking. Because you have so much knowledge. It's like talking to a doctor, and he has to sort of laymanize all of this information that he has known, or he or she, he could be a girl doctor, has known for decades at some point, years at other points. So it's the same thing when you're a lawyer, or you work in the legal field, or you understand the law, or you study the law, you've gone to law school, and you start looking at it only from that angle. And you present your cases that way because it's fair to say that you're there to work with the law. But jurors aren't lawyers. Some of them don't even work in the legal field. They get the elements told to them, and then they follow what the judge told them to do. Okay? So when you have testimony like this, and you have a mother on the stand, and she's sweet, and you know that her daughter's been in this relationship, and you can sort of feel for her. Even if you never once had a kid, you've seen or heard or been with somebody that's been in this type of toxic relationship. So being the mother of that person is how you start to develop empathy, right? Or an exact compassion because you've been there. Why would you, as a defense attorney, a smart one, cross? You're just going to walk down a rabbit hole. So the question was asked to me, specifically by one of you. You asked me, the defense did not cross the mother, Cassie's mother, Mrs. Ventura. Doesn't that show they were afraid of this witness? And so I'm answering your question. No. It means that you're not going to go down that rabbit hole. She has empathy, and even you have it sitting there as a defense attorney, I'm sure, if you have any feelings at all of this mother having to go through this situation because her daughter's involved with this man. This man that you probably didn't want her involved with in the first place. But she is, and she's gone this far, and now he's calling your phone, threatening to release tapes, and telling you you've got to pay $20,000. And so out of fear, what you do is you mortgage your home to get the money. And you pay this man. Now, this witness gives a lot of elements, because basically what she's saying is, he scared me, coercion, right? He threatened to release these tapes of my loved one. He has in his possession, unless I pay him for them. You can sort of synopsisize that as being sort of the feelings behind what was being said in court. And you felt that. Even if that wasn't 100% accurate, you felt that. So it didn't make sense for the defense to go in there and beat up on someone's mother. You know what I mean? Even if you could have been listen, she works for... The jurors are going to look at you and be like, you are such a jerk. Even if that's true, she's still somebody's mother. You're just going to think this guy or this girl or whomever is doing this cross, no matter how right they sound, they are absolutely wrong for doing that. So it's no questions. You're just not going to go there. And it made sense that, to me, the minute they said that, I thought, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. And I was thinking while I was listening to this, because in the courtroom, and people send me stuff, and I'm listening to this, and I'm thinking to myself, from the transcripts. My transcripts come from the court reporter. And I'm sitting here listening to these transcripts, and I think to myself, what's he gonna say to this? What are they gonna say to this woman's? Why would you go in on the mom? And then he's, no questions. So I thought, you couldn't have done a better job by just letting that be what it is. Do you know what I mean? What else did we have? So that was kind of like a lot of it. So just speaking from the strategies of the two attorneys appearing, because the defense has not really fully presented theirs, other than an opening, you kind of see there's just holes. And I keep saying that because we didn't want to see them. We didn't want there to be holes. We wanted that to be open shut. He should be locked under the jail, and that's it. But it's not coming out like that. It's not coming out like that, and it's not coming out like that, and particularly you've got to keep in mind when you're in a trial like this where you are. You've got to keep in mind, the thoughts that could be going through the juror's head. You have to keep in mind that your strategy is sort of set in place, and how do you modify that as you go along. Before I finish, because I have to wrap up, because I don't want to be too long on this because it's covered all the time. But there was a psychologist. I have to hit this lady. Her name is Dawn Hughes. Now I say her name that way because she's familiar with legally testifying for trials. And she testified in a generality, which is very seldom done in a trial. Generally, you're testifying for that specific trial, for specific people, as it applies to what is being charged. But she decides, because someone said, well, who made that decision that she only, she's supposed to be an expert witness? She was a blind expert witness. And I'm trying to say it so I can explain it in a way where people kind of get it. Blind meaning not attached to the case necessarily. Yes, she's a witness, and so some of you are like, what, she's a witness? No, as an expert though, she's a blind expert, meaning she doesn't have specifics for this case. She has what generally happens in a specific, when this normally happens, under normal conditions, under most conditions, under the most common conditions. These are what are the psychological, thought processes of this particular group of people. In this case, we're talking about abuse, right? Now somebody asked the question, why did we need this witness as an expert in a case if we're not talking about abuse? I think the exact question was that. So, and the answer to that question is because Cassie has her sympathies in that area. She has to show why she didn't leave him. She has to show that she was staying there as it applies to Rico, meaning this sort of enterprise scenario. She had nowhere to go. He had control. He would beat her if she did not. And they have to show that there's a mentality that goes along with that. Because you're thinking, well, she could have just left at any time. I mean, if you use the tape, for example, and some people were like, well, the security came. Why didn't she just leave then? They have to show, no, there's a hold, because coercion is not necessarily just physical abuse, but it is mental abuse. And so the hold could be that he had her physically abusing, but also he was mentally abusing her, so you have to have this sort of expert come in and talk about what was happening. And this is why it was applying generally to this case. But why only in general? Why not go into specifics? And the question is to question the character, and I don't know if this was brought up, of this particular psychologist forensic psychologist, to give her an exact wording, is because she was chosen for many trials, number one. But an attorney brought to the attention that she was questioned for a specific trial and not chosen. The implication there, and I do not know if this is true, this is all alleged, okay? It wasn't brought up in the trial necessarily, that she just testifies for, I would say, benefit. You're like, what the heck does that mean? If you ever seen, just to put it on just a basic level, A Time to Kill. And there's a like psychologist in there. For those of you that haven't seen the movie, I can't help you with that. But for those of you that had seen the movie, Matthew McConaughey, Sandra Bullock, great performances. Can't forget Samuel L. Jackson. And they're talking to this psychologist. And the psychologist turns out to be a person that they prove in the courtroom to find people insane, because he was trying to testify whether this person was insane or not insane, for the purposes of trial. So I would say, in a case when you see someone sort of a general and they're kind of well known around, it could be this type of witness. Now, will that be shown to the jurors? I don't know, because I haven't seen the defense yet. But I bring it to you because that could be a possibility that you might see later coming up. We don't know if it will be, and we don't know if it will ever be anything. But that's sort of the theme with me kind of thinking there's a little room there for the defense to sort of knock down the expert, with maybe even their own expert. And this is not to say I'm on one side or the other. This is just legally speaking. But it's not to be labored too much, because we have to remember why we're there. Also, there has been a lot of testimony that is sort of desensitizing everybody. We keep hearing over and over again, he's a bad guy, he's a horrible person, he's a bad guy, he's a horrible person. And no one's actually saying that, but in demonstrating in these freak-offs. And we've heard about these freak-offs, and we know what happens in them now, and it's already day 10. And this trial is intended to go on at least for 2 months. And day 10, everybody's already like, oh, here we go again with some more freak-off stuff. You know, like, and that's what you don't want as a prosecutor. I mean, it was actually, realistically speaking, almost that in week 1. So, here we are. Here we are, and we got caught up, and I gave some legals. But at the end of the day, it's what the law says. It's not what we feel. It's not all these opinions. People love salacious stuff, so we're all running around, giving an opinion, and I think Cassie this, and I think that, and Diddy was this way, and his kids are running around. But you take all that away, and you take away everything that we've said that the jurors don't see, and you focus on what's actually the charges and what's happening inside the courtroom. It looks like the prosecution still has some work to do, and that the defense has a lot of openings that they can go in and close. Thank you so much. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. I feel like I look a little shiny, but that's okay. I went too long, but thank you so much, and I will see you guys.